The floor of the galactic conclave trembled, not from impact, but from movement. Hundreds of alien delegates shifted, their feet, claws, tendrils, and slithering appendages, creating a syncopated living soundscape. Commander Rain Voss did not flinch. He moved with deliberate stillness, the way a predator masks intent with restraint. His uniform was dark steel gray, bearing no rank insignia, only the Terran crest stitched in matte fiber near his collarbone. He was Earth's sole envoy, standing unguarded beneath banners he had never pledged loyalty to. From the upper galleries, the Vicari delegation made their entrance. Their armor bore intricate etchings, not for tradition, but for intimidation. Their leader, Threx, stood a head taller than most of his own kind. With forearms folded across his plated chest and skin that shimmered like oil beneath station lighting, he exuded the confidence of a species unchallenged. The room quieted without command. "You may present your appeal," announced the conclave speaker, a bulbous being suspended in a gravity well, its form shifting gently with each word modulated through glottal harmonics. Voss stepped forward, unarmed, unaccompanied. His bootfalls were the only Terran sound in a hall that hadn't heard Earth's voice before. He stopped short of the central dais, hands behind his back, gaze steady. No theatrics, no bravado, only calculus. "On behalf of the united sovereignties of Earth," Voss began, "I offer observation. Cooperation may follow, should it prove mathematically wise." Several delegates murmured, antennae tilting, fins twitching. The Vicari contingent remained motionless. "We recognize the utility of peace," Voss continued, tone flat, "and note that observation precedes alignment in all systems, diplomatic or physical." Threx clicked his upper mandibles. His voice came through the translator as coarse sand over broken glass. "You arrive without escort. You speak without submission. You propose integration through arithmetic. Is this the height of your species' arrogance?" Voss blinked once. "Number merely its baseline." The Vicari delegation erupted in laughter, raw, rasping noise meant to disorient. Other species watched with subtle tension. None intervened. Voss's face remained expressionless. "You mistake silence for compliance," Threx said, descending the steps slowly. "You mistake inaction for permission. We mistake neither." "Then your models are flawed," Voss replied. With a gesture from Threx, the conclave lighting shifted. Overhead, a laser plasma display ignited. It showed Earth's envoy ship, a diplomatic cruiser, hovering in a neutral orbit outside the station. Without ceremony, 3 Vikari warships dropped from acceleration corridors and opened fire. The display stuttered for a moment as the cruiser's hull broke apart. A blossom of incandescence consumed the screen, ending in cold data telemetry. 0 survivors registered. No escape pods, no counterfire, nothing. Someone gasped. A delegate from the Merlin Confederacy stood and began to protest, but a glare from Threx silenced him. Voss didn't speak. He only looked up at the remains of his delegation. Then his gaze returned to Threx. "That vessel held no weapons, no shields beyond navigation thresholds," he said calmly. "Its death will be logged as an initiation." "Of war," Threx tilted his head. "Number of consequence." The speaker's stabilizers hissed faintly. "This act violates 11 conclave statutes." "The Vicari Empire does not answer to statutes," Threx growled. "We eliminate variables before they complicate projections." Voss finally shifted his stance, by less than a centimeter. "Earth has never relied on predictions. We write contingency algorithms." Another shift in lighting. Earth's communication link, previously idle, activated. The station's upper wall, where no one had looked before, flickered to life with a hardline encryption sigil. A single message repeated in Terran Standard across the stream. "Initiation sequence acknowledged. Obsidian protocol now in motion." Voss turned his head slightly. "Our delegation is complete." With no further words, he walked out. No guards stopped him. No orders were given to detain. The conclave was too stunned to act, and Threx, despite his earlier confidence, did not move. Moments later, the conclave's lower chamber began to buzz, not from noise, but from connection requests. One by one, Terran proxy signals blinked onto interstellar channels across known space. They didn't broadcast video. They sent coordinates, resource stockpiles, power grid weaknesses, all classified Vicari data, leaked not to allies, to everyone. Threx barked for calm silence, but the damage was already spreading. Back in orbit, Earth's last diplomatic satellite, housed in a dead asteroid shell, spun once on a rotational pivot. Then it ignited, beaming encrypted packets to lunar cores and Titan's shadow fleets. Below Earth's crust, the language of the planet changed. Civilian supply drones rerouted their cargo to launch silos. Mining machines emerged from disuse and began melting down infrastructure into alloys. Network overlays began rerouting bandwidth from entertainment grids to planetary defense schema. Domestic AI systems reduced emotional subroutines and resumed original wartime protocols. Earth didn't mourn, Earth calculated. In an underground room carved into Siberian bedrock, Admiral Corin Belth stood before a wall of analog switches. No displays, no sound. Just one button marked Obsidian, Lockout. He pressed it. 30 seconds later, every orbital ghost satellite came back online. Silent, black-cloaked, code cold. At the same time, a classified Terran file known as Spiral Doctrine 9 was unlocked. It contained a list of names. One of them was Voss, and beside it, operative rank Catalyst. In the Galactic conclave, Threx stared at the blackened display where Earth's envoy ship had vanished. He clicked his upper arms together, dismissing the memory, but the phrase echoed anyway, like a foreign equation no Vicari had ever solved. Escalation accepted. And somewhere, deep in the neural folds of the Vicari's predictive war engine, an anomaly warning blinked red. Variable unresolved, model compromised, species threat level revised, pending recalibration, close every outbound gate, full internal black. The clock just started ticking. Admiral Corin Belth didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The command center 30 stories beneath Reykjavik locked its transit feeds instantly. No alarm sounded, no warnings, just silence swallowed by transition. A technician across the room blinked twice, then turned his chair without speaking. A line of red lights activated across the wall behind him. Each light represented a dormant fleet node. Each buried, each forgotten, each designed for a war that didn't exist. Until now. Belth moved through the room without breaking pace. Every screen, every panel responded to biometric recognition alone. He reached the command altar, placed his hand on the analog brass plate, the only piece of hardware not routed through Terran defense networks. The system didn't ask for credentials. It asked for contact. On the wall ahead, a laser plasma display unfolded vertically. The lights dimmed around its rectangular edge as data poured in. Mining drones on Europa changed course mid-cycle. Ice harvesters at Enceladus rerouted towards shipframe forges. Civilian satellites retasked to fire grid mapping arrays. The Terran machine wasn't waking up. It was remembering why it existed. "Feed it through Colton's mesh," Belth ordered. The technician, to his left, nodded. "He's already sinking ghost layers." 3,000 kilometers away, buried beneath the Arctic shelf, Colton Mayer sat in a cold room with power lines thicker than his arms. He wasn't military. He'd never held a weapon. He'd spent most of his life automating obsolete delivery drones and restoring failed urban logistics systems. But today he was rerouting old-world infrastructure into orbital targeting matrices. "I never thought the contingency folder would be real," he muttered. The ceiling panels shifted as coolant systems activated behind him. No alert bells, no ceremonial tones, just the sound of operations shifting into combat logic. His fingers moved across a command surface that lit only where touched. Each connection he made was invisible from the outside. That was the point. Every Terran citizen on the civilian net lost access to entertainment networks, marketplaces, and interplanetary feeds within 20 seconds. Traffic rerouted into blank bandwidth. AI moderators shut off all emotional learning protocols. Search queries vanished mid-type. Civilian devices rebooted with new software, ones that defaulted to silence. Colton's eyes never left the control node. One stream showed him data from a long-dormant energy plant beneath Patagonia. Another linked to a decommissioned transport array buried in the ruins of Jakarta. His voice activated the final node without ceremony. Ghost Relay 8 now echoes. No repeat. Passive spread only. Above them, on the far side of the moon, the dust shifted as a series of magnetic anchors released from stone. The object hidden there hadn't been built. It had been assembled out of false geological data. What looked like natural lunar terrain separated, revealing a chamber with 3 stacked ships. Not flagged, not named, only tagged internally by 3-letter designations. The last of them activated with a low-frequency pulse strong enough to interrupt communications for every Vicari ship listening beyond Mars. Admiral Belth received the signal within the Reykjavik vault. He turned to his second in command. "We will not respond through public channels. Let their analysts speculate." "Should I prepare a counter-statement to the conclave?" she asked. "Number, prepare nothing. We owe no declarations." On the surface, the night sky over Earth shifted ever so slightly. Not visibly, not photometrically, but the stars being tracked by Terran orbital defense arrays now included mobile anomalies, objects that did not exist until required. They carried no weapon signatures. They didn't move, but they watched. Back inside the core chamber, Belth observed as lines of encoded commands wrapped across a secondary plasma interface. These weren't attack orders. They were redistributions. Transit hubs became choke points. Terraforming platforms became defense scaffolds. Public space elevators switched to decoy mode. Civilian ships were marked for multi-phase evacuation grid training. No panic, no drama, just instructions. "We've disconnected from conclave signals," reported the systems officer. "Entire Terran net appears offline from their perspective. Zero trace activity." "They'll assume paralysis," Belth replied. "They'd be wrong." Colton Mayer initiated the final sequence from his cold room. The systems didn't ask for approval. They recognized his access as Ghost Key certified. He uploaded a module called Retina, short for Reactive Terrain Node Adaptation. It was built to convert outdated farming AI into environmental war assets. Old irrigation bots, aerial mappers, and geological samplers began receiving encrypted packets across half of Earth's uninhabited regions. Their purpose was no longer agriculture. In the orbital ring, maintenance vessels dropped their cargo and sealed themselves into magnetic rails. They vanished from civilian manifests. Their launch codes rewrote themselves every 10 seconds. Any attempt to scan them would return randomized chemical compositions designed to confuse alien spectral analysis. At the Oslo Joint Strategic Core, Terran military intelligence fed ghost footage of the destroyed envoy ship into simulation engines, not to assess damage, but to reconstruct it frame by frame. They weren't analyzing a mistake, they were dissecting intent. "They fired before atmospheric identification resolved," a specialist noted. "That wasn't reactionary, it was premeditated." "Which means their command structure assumed impunity," Belth said. "That assumption is now an opening." A soft tone echoed once, a unique sound that played only during engagement tier operations. Colton's feeds synchronized with Earth's orbital debris nets. All registered space junk began low-thrust mobilization. What appeared abandoned was now moving toward newly assigned nodes. On Mars, deep within a crater once used for terraforming research, a dome cracked open. Beneath it, a buried launch array powered up. Within 6 minutes, 4 surveillance hulls launched, each without an ignition signature. They rotated into deep shadow, then disappeared from even Terran command logs. In orbit around Saturn's smaller moon, a relay blinked once, bounced its signal off 3 inactive satellites, and then died permanently. Its message had already spread. And in the stillness of Earth's deep oceans, one last sequence triggered. A fleet of submerged constructs, once classified as geological stabilizers, began to surface. None of these units had names, none had mission logs, but every one of them now held targeting assignments tied to the Vicari Empire's known logistic supply lines. No Earth broadcast was made. No Terran spokesperson stepped onto a dais. Not a single threat was issued. And yet, across Vicari-controlled space, satellites that once read static now blinked red. "They're already moving toward it," said Lieutenant Nurek, tapping a command node embedded into his forearm. 6 Vicari hulls. Raider configuration. Predatory vector confirmed. The freighter drifted along the edge of Sector 513, neutral in law, hostile by nature. Its body showed surface burns and fractures across its port side. Antenna arrays warped as if microwaved mid-burst. External compartments were jettisoned deliberately. Life pods hung loose from exposed skeletal arms. Every visual read screamed crippled prey, and that was exactly the point. Inside the freighter, the corridors were too quiet. No coolant hum, no mechanical cycling, no crew chatter. Only the occasional flick of power routing through wall conduits, as if the ship's circulatory system twitched in simulated agony. The oxygen levels were intentionally unstable, just enough to support breathing, just little enough to dissuade scans from picking up consistent biosignatures. Captain Varn of the Vikari strike unit growled into his interlink. Board and extract data. Disregard survivors. He didn't bother watching the sensor replay. The ship was Terran, small, civilian class, flag diplomatic. It barely carried hardened shielding, let alone weapons. An easy mark. The Vicari believed in efficiency, and this target had bonus kill stamped all over it. His boarding teams deployed. 3 squads of 4 soldiers breached at offset hatches, entering without resistance. They activated adaptive helmets and motion trackers, advancing down parallel passageways. Pulse rifles aimed. Boots clanked against fabricated alloy floors. Team 1 passed an open storage bay. The crates inside were sliced cleanly. No contents, no scorched edges, no explosion residue. "Nothing here," the lead barked. Team 2 reached the central processing chamber. The life support console blinked erratically, a faint readout looping coordinates from 12 hours prior. "This system's cycling phantom protocols," one Vicari technician muttered, tapping through diagnostic glyphs. "Something's wrong. There's no active memory retention." Team 3 never got the chance to speak. A whine, not mechanical, not weaponized, rose through the ship's internal field. A shudder rippled through the bulkheads. Then sudden decompression vented 2 corridors at once. 3 Vicari were flung backward, their exosuits fragmenting as negative pressure crushed their joints. The 4th soldier, crawling toward an emergency seal, activated an override switch. The switch was never wired to life support. It activated a gravity spike. Vicari raiders in 2 decks collapsed instantly, limbs buckling, internal organs compressing under the artificial mass surge. It wasn't sustained, it didn't need to be. Just one moment of total collapse, and then vacuum again. Their armor, designed for battlefield combat, wasn't built for adaptive torque field manipulation. Captain Varn watched his heads-up display drop from 12 active units to 1. Static overtook the readouts. His remaining officer sent one final message. "This isn't a freighter." The ship shifted. Outside, internal clamps released. The wreck didn't disintegrate. It shed armor plates deliberately. Underneath the ragged disguise was a carbon-threaded shell designed to radiate minimal heat, no EM pulses, and 0 impulse noise. Yurin screamed for withdrawal, but his signal never reached them. Several seconds before the freighter detonated, a single data spike burst from a distant asteroid half a system away. That spike wasn't random, it was structured. It had been monitoring everything. Inside the hidden outpost, 90 kilometers below the rocky crust, a Terran observation crew processed the feed. The data wasn't raw, it was pre-formatted. Engine response, Vicari comm frequencies, acceleration curves, armor stress feedback. A complete behavioral model, not just of the ships, but of their pilots. The black ship had no engines. It was towed into position 2 months prior and then buried. Its observation cone was pointed through artificial gravitational lensing, so even directional energy traces wouldn't give it away. Inside, 3 operators sat behind unlit panels, watching feeds etched into light-reactive walls. "No panic," said Specialist Eirik. "Not even when the gravity trap triggered. Just procedural recoil." "They've done this before," noted Captain Sarn. "These weren't rookies. That's the real takeaway." The data was already transmitting. Beneath the North Atlantic, Admiral Belth received the relay without ceremony. The display before him wasn't filled with explosions. It was filled with timelines, movement patterns, neural latency mappings of Vicari response under surprise conditions. It was a playbook, theirs. Beside him, a junior analyst blinked. "Sir, did we just lose the crew?" "No," Belth said. "We sacrificed the question." The analyst hesitated. "I don't follow." "That wasn't a trap to kill Vicari. Belth clarified. That was a diagnostic. They weren't the targets. Their tactics were. On Mars, inside a low-atmosphere relay point once labeled as a failed agricultural dome, a replica of the freighter's setup was being tested in simulation. Not to repeat it, to replace it. Their scanning priorities shifted at 38 seconds post-breach, said an AI node running recursive analysis. Probability of repeat approach. Low. Update the protocol. Let's make the next one look like a mobile medical triage. Add heat signatures that mimic wounded breathing cycles, the operator ordered. They'll take longer, but they'll still come. Across Earth's orbital plane, relay stations adjusted. Civilian research vessels recalibrated passive sensor logs. They were no longer observing comets. They were recording energy trail echoes from Vicari rating formations. The planet didn't react with vengeance. It shifted into study mode. In a Terran intelligence compartment beneath the Greenland ice sheet, Colton reviewed the ship data with frozen eyes. We didn't lure them into an ambush, as he said. We handed them a mirror. Did they see it? The voice behind him asked. Only in the final frame. Somewhere at the edge of Vicari-patrolled space, another freighter appeared. Different signature, different damage. A new scent trail for a new hunter. It wasn't bait. It was a question with only one wrong answer. They don't speak, growled Commander Turin. They don't retaliate, and they don't negotiate. This isn't diplomacy, it's dysfunction. Vicari High Command had gathered in Subsector Zethrak, deep beneath the ion-shielded crust of their second core world. The war chamber was carved from fault-stabilized obsidian, its walls covered in moving diagrams, fleet formations, intelligence sweeps, and broadcast intercepts all gliding across laser plasma displays that wrapped the circumference of the council vault. Executor Varn leaned forward, arms resting on the cold ledge of the central command spindle. His crest shifted faintly, a biological tick betraying irritation. 3 incursions in the last cycle, he stated, each without standard Terran markers, each delivering measurable damage. And yet, no follow-up, no demands, no communications. They vanish. They are disorganized, offered strategist Vec. They strike like scavengers, attack, retreat, scatter. Scavengers don't build military ghost nets, replied Turin, eyes narrowing. They don't inject telemetry worms into our pulse tracks. That freighter was a structured lure. Varn activated the deep spectrum overlay. The center display flared to life, showing Earth's entire known communications record. It ended abruptly, exactly 17 rotations prior. Every known Terran beacon, relay, and signal vanished in unison. Strategist Vec frowned. That kind of blackout would collapse most command structures. It would, said a voice from the rear of the chamber. Slow, measured, deliberately soft. Professor Yurin stepped forward, escorted by 2 council guards. He carried no weapon. He never had. A Galarian exoanthropologist, Yurin had studied extinction patterns across 4 galactic epochs. His robes were ceremonial, but his mind was methodical. The Terrans are not frozen, Yurin said. They are stalking. The room quieted. Silence is not absence, he continued. Among apex organisms on their origin world, quiet preceded the ambush, not because they lack capacity, but because they mastered it. Commander Turin twitched his jaw hinge. They're barely 5 standard cycles into faster-than-light travel. You expect us to believe they can field networked fleets? Yurin nodded once. You assume linear progress. They don't evolve in gradients. They break patterns. They leap gaps. He gestured toward the primary map. They vanished from channels, not because they couldn't answer, but because they knew your sensors were tuned to noise. So they offered none. Varn narrowed his gaze. What do you recommend, Professor? Caution. Define caution. Don't step deeper into ground you've not mapped. The executor stood. We control 15 systems. We have garrisons on every perimeter. Our production lines generate hulls faster than theirs can decay. You suggest fear over superiority? I suggest memory over arrogance, Yurin said. The chamber remained still for 5 seconds. Then Varn turned to the display and expanded a sector. Alphazura. Unclaimed, he said. Light mining infrastructure. No Terran presence for 2 standard decades. Close enough to their core to provoke. distant enough to avoid major losses. Terran hissed. You wish to bait them? No, Varn corrected. I want to draw their playbook. If they act, we study it. If they don't, we expand. Yurin exhaled quietly. You mistake their stillness for hesitation. It is not. The executor tapped the approval glyph. Within minutes, orders went out to 4 Vikari battle groups. Destinations: planetary orbit of Alphazura. Their purpose: reclamation through force. Their expectation: no resistance. But what none of them questioned was why Alphazura had remained untouched for 20 years. Because the real Terran play hadn't even started yet. They were still calibrating the board. Target locked. Verify orbital silence. Confirm on my next blink. Commander Varn's voice snapped through the Vicari fleet's tactical link. The warships orbiting Alphazura moved in staggered formation, their hulls sheen from solar exposure. Below them, the planet rotated with predictable stillness. No signs of defense grids, no artificial comm traffic. It looked abandoned, unarmed, empty. Varn's head tilted slightly. Mark that relay tower. Edge of the ridge, he ordered. Send a test pulse. A scout vessel fired a low-yield particle burst toward the tower. It passed cleanly through. No shielding, no return fire, no movement. The tower exploded anyway, not from the impact, but from inside. Varn's heads-up display flickered. Signal distortion blinked across multiple decks. His first officer checked systems. Environmental corruption detected, he said. It's not electronic. Thermal bleed across compartmental vectors. What does that mean? Varn snapped. We're cold, the officer replied. Every reactor is dropping. It's not interference. It's internal. All power signatures are collapsing from the core. Before Varn could reply, every ship in the flotilla began losing thrust. Not from damage, from inertia. Propulsion systems failed sequentially. Coolant channels iced over with molecular crystallization that bypassed every known insulation countermeasure. On screen, flight paths began to stagger, not violently but with mechanical finality. One by one, vessels drifted out of control. Stabilizers froze. Navigation sensors collapsed. Control surfaces locked in place. Then the heads-up display glitched once more. This time not from failure, but from input. A single orbit-wide signature pinged and vanished. No source. No energy trail. Then came the anchors. 4 projectiles launched from planetary blind zones rose silently and struck simultaneously. They did not detonate. They embedded. Each anchor used electromagnetically accelerated core tethers, designed to impact and inject programmable subroutines through quantum resonance into hull command matrices. They turned the Vicari ships into statues. No alarms triggered. The crews inside watched their systems go blank. Not flash, not crash, but vanish. Every Vikari ship locked in position. No external fire. No detected Terran vessels. Just null control. In high-orbit Sector 3, a Terran relay node recorded the event. It had no weapons, no crew, no propulsion, just a mirror relay. Everything it saw, it sent once before self-erasure. Back on Earth, Admiral Belth watched the feed on a wall-mounted laser plasma slab. He did not smile. The warhead performance? He asked. Colton responded over cold link. Cryocore delivery exceeded modeled outcome. Full engine shutdowns. Not even fallback thrusters remained responsive. It's confirmed. They can't thaw mid-cycle. And the platform visibility? No backtrace signatures. Spectral wash from the anchors matches planetary magnetic patterns. No one saw us. Not even sensors tuned for orbital anomalies. Belth nodded. Mark it. Doctrine classification. Anchor kill. On Alphazura's orbit, the Vicari fleet hung frozen. 37 warships held captive by a strike that never announced itself. Inside the command ship, Varn stared at his blank console. Why aren't we dead? His second asked. Varn didn't reply, because death would have been explanation. This silence was a message. No Terran fleet had appeared. No demand had followed. Not a single human signature pinged local space. The only sound Varn heard was his own blood thudding through his carapace, and the quiet realization that they were pieces, not players. And they'd just been removed from the board. They're not attacking anymore. They're rewriting us. The voice came from a Vicari comms officer stationed at Outpost Quarren 12, his eyes wide, pupils stretched beyond natural dilation. The base around him glowed with warning lights. Most weren't alarms, just systemic hallucinations. Sensors blinked red at nothing. Bioscanners showed friendly units as enemies. Thermal overlays rendered hallucinated movement. The walls seemed to pulse. Commander Dalek stepped over a broken console, grabbing the trembling officer by the throat. "Speak clearly. What did you see?" "It spoke in my voice," the officer gasped. "It told me to lock the door. Said there was something wrong outside. It sounded like me." Daleks froze. The voice hadn't come from a speaker. It came from the base's internal memory loop, a layer only accessible to command AI. But their AI cores had been wiped 2 cycles ago. In another quadrant, on field-based Synthol 3, drones descended from upper cliffs. They mimicked standard Vicari reconnaissance units, flashing friendlies, correct IDs, proper timing intervals. Only when they approached the perimeter and changed signal frequency did the defenders realize they were not their own. Too late. The flyers dispersed audio fragments, recorded Vicari emergency cries, mixed with static and distorted coordinates. One drone landed near a munitions depot and transmitted a single code. All surrounding storage chambers superheated from within. Ammunition cracked open like fruit under pressure. None of the weapons had been touched. They cooked themselves. Elsewhere, at a logistics hub deep within the planet, Flareth's second moon, engineers found their alloy stockpiles turning viscous. Reinforcement beams inside troop transports began dripping, not melting, breaking cohesion. Metallurgy teams had no explanation. The temperatures hadn't risen. The compounds just stopped bonding. Vicari High Command convened under restricted spectrum blackout. Their war map was no longer lit by offensive movements, but by system failures. Every quadrant pinged irregular anomalies. Troop locations no longer lined up with manifests. Equipment inventory shifted by the hour. No trace of Terran fleets, no debris, just errors. General Threx slammed his fist into the meeting slab. "This is psychological warfare. They're not destroying us, they're hollowing us." "Then hit back," growled Counselor Varnick. "Trace the sabotage lines. Scorch the planets." "We've done that," another snapped. "Alphazura was sterilized. No energy return. The next day, our fuel reserves turned to sludge." "Their ships must be infiltrating our comm relays," a technician suggested. Professor Yurin's voice cut across the room. "That is not how they function. You're thinking in straight lines." No one wanted to hear from him, but they listened. "They've stopped attacking installations," he said. "Now they're targeting belief." "What belief?" snapped Threx. "The one you built your empire on," Yurin replied, walking slowly across the room. "That strength is the absence of vulnerability. But humans don't erase what you see. They corrupt what you trust." Back in Field Division Ether 6, soldiers patrolling the ruins of an old Terran outpost heard a whisper echo from below the flooring. One voice, rasping, uncertain, said in perfect Vicari dialect, "They left me behind. Don't close the door." The squad sealed the hallway, then received word no Terran had been present in the system for 12 cycles. The outpost AI was inactive. No logs, no transmissions, nothing. The recording had come from an empty suit. At the same time, near the edge of Sector Moretti's, a Vicari gunship intercepted a floating relay buoy tagged with Vicari markings. Upon docking, the onboard system ran an auto handshake, standard protocol. Instead of connection, the ship's internal comms activated a broadcast of the vessel's own crew discussing retreat. Edited, looped, spliced into shame. The captain tried to shut it down. The controls were unresponsive. For 6 minutes, the ship played its crew's false defeat, just loud enough for nearby Vicari vessels to receive. The next morning, 2 of those vessels defected toward neutral space. Varn's command council fractured. Some demanded full planetary incursions, burn worlds until Terrans surfaced. Others whispered treason, suspected their own admirals, questioned sensor feeds. A few stopped attending briefings altogether. They no longer believed in maps. The scariest part wasn't damage, it was doubt. Humans never arrived. They just echoed. And the longer the Vicari waited, the more their empire stopped looking like an army and started sounding like a haunted corridor. Cut the outer seal. No sparks, no resonance. Do it like the crate was never here. Operative Jern Drell whispered into his throat mic, barely audible over the quiet shift of artificial gravity plates as the diplomatic cargo vessel docked beneath Vicari Prime's orbital exchange tier. His squad, 6 men, no insignia, no ranks visible, waited inside a modified containment unit labeled as archival seed storage. Legal, undetectable, protected under centuries-old neutrality law. The outer wall separated with a sigh, vacuum lock disengaging in a single ripple across the bonding strip. The hull cracked open, revealing a loading bay staffed by 2 bored Vikari handlers. They weren't even armed. That was the brilliance of this entry route. Nobody scanned diplomatic transfers. It would violate treaties older than half the star systems they passed through. The handlers never made a sound. 2 needles, 2 collapses. Jern stepped over them without comment, signaling forward with a single blink recorder embedded in his orbital bone. They moved as if pre-coded. The infiltration path had been rehearsed 7 times in vacuum chambers across Europa's ice tunnels. Every corridor here was mirrored in their neural overlays. Movement became memory. Muscle overrode thought. There were no delays, no calls, no pauses. They descended into Subcore 8, 3 kilometers beneath the palace's lowest chamber. There, embedded within a containment lattice of anti-phase conduits and dark spectrum dampeners, pulsed the void churn. Not a bomb. Not exactly. The device was a gravitational spool, capable of inverting matter state across a 5-planet radius. Its blast wouldn't just kill, it would nullify, convert orbital bodies into noise, atmospheres into vacancy. It didn't explode, it erased. Jern stood motionless as his team surveyed the chamber. Data spines ran from the churn into a crystal array network that wrapped around the floor like vines. The interface console was written in Vicari glyph code, a language he couldn't read, but didn't have to. Their AI had already brute forced the syntax 2 days earlier, decoding authorization from intercepted palace neural traffic. There, recorded in 4-layer encryption, was the Emperor's voice. If they breached the capital, came the deep, dry growl, initiate the collapse. I will not suffer humiliation, not at the hands of rot-flesh primitives. This world burns before it kneels. The room stood still. Stream it, Jern ordered. Operative CERN tapped his relay pod into the array. The broadcast went live, masked, rerouted through ghost satellites Earth had seeded into Vicari orbital clutter over the past month. Every citizen tuned to standard government channels would receive the Emperor's command. Every loyalist would hear what loyalty truly cost. They didn't wait for confirmation. They didn't need applause. They planted collapsible codec flares and moved for extraction. But the corridor had changed. Vicari Prime's pulse network adapted. The hallways were pulsing with redirected magnetism. Routes warped. Walls expanded into patterns not logged in any blueprint. It wasn't defense, it was destabilization. A last-ditch effort to disorient intruders by making the entire palace flicker with fabricated architecture. Jern activated a ground anchor and locked his boots. Mark this path, he barked. Use retinal lags. Trust your afterimage, not your eyes. The team advanced, ignoring the illusion of pathways that blinked and shimmered, choosing instead the recorded echo their optic nerves had captured 2 seconds prior. One operative stumbled. His foot passed through an invisible edge. He dropped. No scream, just absence. The others didn't look back. They reached the waste vent corridor, sealed with a grav-slick panel. Not meant for people, meant for discarded palace runoff. Liquid waste, failed bioprints, scrap fragments. They dove in. Free fall for 20 seconds. Then pressure corrected, and they slid onto a slope of cooling refuse and embedded grit. Jern exhaled once, then re-engaged his comms. Uplink complete. Mission integrity preserved. Repeat. Broadcast live. The planet knows. On the upper decks, ripples passed through the palace. Servants stopped walking. Officers paused mid-transmission. In the streets, civilians gathered at public display towers as the Emperor's voice continued to play. His own threat against their lives, now weaponized against him. He had built an empire on fear. Earth had given that fear a mirror. "You didn't defeat us," Yurin said quietly, watching the city above through a fractured grate. "You exposed your own infection." No gunfire followed, no pursuit. Just the sound of the Vicari world unraveling from within. "Shut down the relay tower now." The guard's voice cracked as the plaza crowd surged forward, ignoring his orders. The tower, once a symbol of Imperial command, now looped a singular transmission. No anthem, no proclamation. Just the Emperor's voice over and over. "If they breach the capital, initiate the collapse." Each time the words played, another rank of Vikari civilians dropped their tools and turned toward the palace. Executor Varn stormed through the west corridor of the high chamber, flanked by a half-dozen elite guards. His breathing came sharp, not from exertion, but disbelief. Every station he passed was vacant. Officers had abandoned their posts mid-command. Ration dispensers remained untouched. The walls carried the low flicker of energy degradation. Entire departments had disconnected from central systems. "We will not let this rabble unseat law," he snarled. Counselor Drath met him at the rotunda entrance. "They're not targeting soldiers," he said. "They're pulling down uplinks, disabling orbital feed lines." "They intend to blind us?" Varn growled. "No," Drath answered. "They intend to stop the device." Outside on the sky bridges surrounding the capital's north quarter, thousands of citizens pushed against military barricades. Not one held weapons. They carried scaffolding, cutting torches, terminal disruptors, tools, not arms. Troopers received orders to stand firm. But when they aimed their plasma casters, some refused to fire. Others powered down. One lieutenant removed his chest plate, dropped it on the ground, and walked into the crowd. By mid-cycle, orbital station Vesic was gone. Not destroyed, but voluntarily powered down by its crew. They disabled propulsion, deactivated life support, and locked the command bridge with a one-way override. Before the signal cut, their final message read, "This outpost refuses to be used for planetary extermination." Executor Varn viewed the footage from the core council chamber. The laser plasma display reflected off his blackened eyes. Beside him, no counselors remained, just empty chairs and the distant echo of footfalls retreating through marble corridors. He turned to his aide. "Activate planetary defense. I want all ground sectors locked. Fire on any congregation exceeding 30 units." The aide didn't move. Varn's teeth clenched. "Did you not hear?" The aide raised a short blade, thrust once, and left him folded over the command table, twitching. In the sky above Vicari Prime, Earth's fleet remained stationary. No weapons discharged, no vessels descended, no threats issued. They simply watched. Every Terran warship sat just outside gravitational range, motionless, black-armored against the light of the local star. Passive sensors recorded every broadcast, every movement. Not one ship transmitted a message. Not one showed signs of life. To the Vicari, it looked like judgment rendered still. Within the palace, the remaining guards dragged Varn's body into the incineration trench, letting it roll soundlessly down the slope. None of them spoke. They returned to their stations, but no longer obeyed any hierarchy. Orders came from no one. The structure had collapsed, but inertia carried the rituals. Down in the sublayers, a massive crowd of civilians surrounded the void churn control spire. Engineers dismantled access nodes while miners, drawn from the planet's old tunnel networks, overlaid crystal dampeners to neutralize the gravitational pulse. Dozens perished during containment work. No one left. One old diplomat, long retired, used the emergency intercom to address the planet. "We have seen what leadership becomes when infected by pride. Let no heir remain. Let no name carry forward." The broadcast was not cut. The Empire had no one left to silence it. On Earth's flagship, Admiral Belth stood before the main viewport. He said nothing. Commander Rain Voss joined him, both men surrounded by data feeds showing civilian mobilization across Vicari colonies. Every sector was following the capital's lead, refusing commands, disabling weapons, shielding non-combatants. Voss studied the display. "Is this surrender?" he asked. "No," Belth replied. "It's self-amputation. They severed their own hand before it strangled them." Neither man smiled. They didn't celebrate. They recorded. They preserved every data stream, every broadcast, every internal report, not to shame, not to gloat, to remember, because victory had not come from fleets or detonations. It had emerged from a broadcast, a mirror, a single recording, repeated across a civilization until it tore itself apart. As the sun dipped beyond Vicari Prime's horizon, banners once draped across palace columns lay crumpled in the dust. No new flags rose to replace them, and still Earth's fleet hovered, unmoving, because the lesson hadn't finished echoing. Begin transmission, one relay only, record everything. Admiral Corin Belth stood at the forward deck of Earth's flagship, Sable Accord, flanked by no guards, no advisors, just silence and the sheen of solar flare scattering along the viewport. Below, Vicari Prime no longer burned, but it didn't heal either. It waited, still, uncertain, leaderless. He adjusted his collar. A small LED blinked green, signaling system-wide broadcast had gone live. This message is directed to the remaining systems of the former Vicari Empire. No emotion, no emphasis, no dramatics. This is not your end. He paused, but it will never be your empire again. He stepped back, and the screen cut. No additional commentary, no military display, no music. Across the planetary arcs, Terran ships repositioned in a lock-grid perimeter. Not invasion, enforcement. Patrols monitored atmospheric entry, outgoing traffic, resource stations. All weapons remained cold. No ground units deployed. Each ship broadcast one line on encrypted loop. Terran emergency custodianship active. Violations will void compliance. From the edge of the Gamma Theledry system, a neutral ambassador relayed a message from 3 minor empires seeking confirmation. Was this the end of war or the beginning of administration? Earth's reply was automatic, machine-timed, pre-written. No hostilities remain. Governance has transitioned. The word conquest appeared nowhere. On the floor of the reconstituted Interstellar Council, Professor Yurin adjusted his robes and took the central podium. Around him sat 40 representatives. No voices interrupted, no side murmurs. They were waiting. "I warned you," he began, "but warnings mean little without pain." A few shifted uncomfortably. Others looked down at their consoles. No one left. "You mocked the Terran approach," he continued. "You believed silence was confusion. That absence meant hesitation. You misread patience as delay. You mistook a mapped strategy for weakness." He placed one finger against the control node. A heads-up display shimmered mid-air, revealing a rotating diagram of the Vicari political web, now riddled with blank spaces where systems had disconnected. Leaders had vanished. Colonies had ceased responding. "You thought power was how loudly one announces command," Yurin said. "What you witnessed instead was control. Total. Uncompromising. Unemotional." He dimmed the feed. "They didn't dismantle the empire by bombardment. They did it by replaying one voice, by letting you hear yourselves." He looked to each quadrant in turn. "And now, if you still wonder whether humanity belongs among us, let me answer plainly." He stepped forward. "You wanted to test them." The chamber leaned closer. "Congratulations." His voice lowered. "You just declared war on the most lethal species alive." The council chamber fell into stillness. Far above, Earth's fleet stayed in orbit. Every sensor active, every channel open. Not one warhead had been used since the first orbital anchor strikes. Not one soldier had touched Vicari soil. There had been no treaties signed, no concessions extracted, just a doctrine. Across the fallen empire's grid, each recovered colony was given a new uplink. Education protocols, medical supplies, water purification algorithms, all embedded with a single clause. Use of Terran assistance acknowledges dissolution of imperial claim. Most agreed without reading the subtext. Some refused. Those systems found their local servers overtaken within hours. No weapons activated, no demands issued, just economic stasis and transport lockout. They accepted within the week. Back on Earth, Commander Rain Voss stepped through the hallways of the International Defense Archive. Behind sealed titanium shutters, every log of the Vicari War had been stored, encrypted, segmented, encoded with pattern recognition traps. None of it was public, because Earth had no interest in history books. It only archived for prediction. In the Sol Defense Command Chamber, a new map glowed across the main wall. Not stars, not borders, not fleets. It displayed timelines. Each major galactic power now monitored by predictive behavioral analysis, powered by pattern loops seeded during the war. Humanity had moved beyond reactions. Now it modeled futures. Back at Vicari Prime, no speeches marked the transition, no banners rose, no monuments were erected. Terran soldiers never landed. There were no parades. And yet, every day, more systems aligned with Earth's channels, adopted its tech, integrated its medical AI, installed its filters. Not because they were forced, but because Earth never offered negotiation. Only consequence. When the Interstellar Summit reconvened for the first time since the conflict, all species attended. Humanity arrived last. Their delegation said little. No threats, no warnings, no terms. They listened. And that frightened the Council more than any superweapon ever had. Because conquest could be fought, but observation, strategic, silent, mathematical, could not be escaped. They hadn't just lost a war, they had witnessed a shift. Power from now forward would no longer be held by those who raised their voices first. It belonged to the one who waited, watched, and then removed you, without a sound.